What's up, trainers? Jerpy's here, and today I'm going to talk about what I believe is the absolute best deck right now to climb the ladder in Pokemon Pocket. Now, that deck I'm going to talk about is the Solgaleo Skarmory deck. And so this is a deck you've probably seen a lot of, and you've probably played against a lot of it on the ladder. And the reason why I believe it's the best deck to climb the ladder is because it's fast. Whether you're winning or you lose, the games will go very, very fast, and you will learn exactly when to concede early and move on to the next one, and when to play games out and try to work towards your win condition. The deck is just good. It's pretty consistent, it's very powerful, and I would say it's definitely an A or maybe even an S tier deck. So it's just good. It's one of the top decks in the meta, so you know you can rely on it to get those wins out when it works. And then the last piece is that it's neutral. This deck, while it does have some matchups that are not ideal, it doesn't really have like a hardcore counter to it. So there's a lot of games where it can just come together and it can steamroll anything. And so I believe that these are three components that make any deck extremely good for climbing the ladder: fast, strong, and neutral matchups. Once again, if you like this content and want to see more of it, smash the like button or subscribe below. All right, now let's get into talking a little bit about how this deck works. So the Solgaleo Skarmory deck is obviously a rare candy deck at its core. The idea here is that you have your Pokemon package of your stage 2s with the rare candy up at the top row. You then have it being supported by kind of that aggro early start Skarmory with the equipment package, choosing the Poison Barb and the 2 Rocky Helmets with the 1 cape to prioritize that kind of chip damage effect over the extra HP, which I believe comes in handy in the current meta state that we are in. And then you have your trainer supporter package below, which in a lot of ways can be kind of remixed depending on what other teams you're playing against, but have found the Sabrina Red and Lily to be the most consistent and helpful cards that this deck really wants to see in order to help it reach its win conditions. Now, the deck almost always wants to start off with a Skarmory in the active spot, and ideally a backup Skarmory sitting on the bench. You then pair both of them with a Pokemon tool, and you can immediately start hitting your opponent as early as that second turn if you have first energy advantage with 50 damage. Now, the Skarmorys are great because they only cost you 1 knockout point, and they do a great job of pressuring the opponent early on, either chipping that big Pokemon in the front down, or a lot of times getting you your first point and maybe even 2 points. It's a really great way to put pressure on your opponent very early on while you're building up that Solgaleo in the back. With your Skarmory doing all of the heavy lifting in the early game, it buys you time to build up your Solgaleo in the back. Now, the great thing about the way this deck works and with rare candy is sometimes your Solgaleo will take a while to come online, and you may be doing it organically through your Cosmoem, or you could actually get the Solgaleo, Cosmog, and the rare candy in the early game, build it up to 2 energy, and you are now able to hit your opponent super early on, oftentimes overwhelming them and running them over, creating a lot of really quick and easy wins that help you climb the ladder efficiently. And lastly, that brings me to the trainer package. Now, unfortunately, the deck requires a lot of space with those Skarmorys, the stage 2 evolutions, and the rare candy, along with the 4 Pokemon tools, so that you ensure you have those Skarmorys hitting for 50 points. You really only have room for 3 trainer cards. Now, I went through a lot of iteration here and found that Sabrina, Red, and Lily are the absolute best companions for this deck. Now, let me tell you why. First, Sabrina is great because it can allow you to buy time by tempoing early game so that you can get your Solgaleo online, but can also act as a finisher when you need to basically get that last point or 2 with that Pokemon on the bench. I like this better than Cyrus because I find that Cyrus has little value in the early game, which makes it so you don't have the ability to do that tempoing. Now, unfortunately, the deck doesn't hit super hard. 120 is great particularly in the early game, but really not enough in the late game. Having that extra 20 damage against an opponent's X is that super, super clutch, and a lot of times can help put it over the edge, particularly if that Pokemon has been damaged with a Pokemon tool or maybe with one of your early Skarmories. And lastly, Lily is awesome because that extra 60 damage that gets healed up is oftentimes enough to give your Solgaleo one more hit against your opponent because its HP pool is so high. That extra 60 essentially puts it at 240 HP or even 260 HP if it's wearing a cape. Now, the biggest tech that you will find used against you to try to disrupt your deck is Guzma, Oricorio, and Mars. Now, the Guzma is a great card your opponent can use to basically blow up all of your Pokemon tools that you have on your Skarmories, rendering them essentially useless, where their 50 power attack now goes down to that 20 power, which is a pretty significant difference. The Oricorio acts as essentially a wall to your Solgaleo while also doing super effective damage to your Skarmories. So you'll find that oftentimes this is one of the ways that decks will try to deal with the Solgaleo deck in the meta. And then lastly, you have Red Card and Mars, which essentially are used a lot of times, I find, in the early game against our deck in order to try to disrupt it from hitting its stage 2 early on in the game. And so you'll oftentimes find that you have to make a lot of early game decisions, which is, do I take the chance of having holding a lot of cards in my hand and getting them basically blown up by a red card or a Mars? Do I take my equipment and do I play them early, my Pokemon tools early on my Skarmories, and risk them getting blown up by Guzma, but also not wanting to give my opponent the extra card advantage if they end up having a Mars? And then for Oricorio, it's all about how do you do the little dance around preserving your Skarmories so that you can take out usually the 1 to 2 that are in your opponent's deck and then be able to sweep the game with the Solgaleo. So just want to call out that these are 3 pieces of tech you always have to be trying to play around because they can do a pretty tremendous job at throwing you off of your win conditions. So to quickly summarize, the thing you want to do with this deck is get the Skarmories down with the Pokemon tools early on, use that to basically chip away at your opponent, try to get 1 or 2 initial points while you build up your Solgaleo in the back. Depending on how long that takes you, it's all about then bringing that Solgaleo in order to sweep or close the game out. Now that sometimes can happen as early as turn 4, or it's something that maybe requires mid or late game in order to get into it. Really, everything else is around just getting you to that point, and some of the things you'll want to think about are obviously the Guzmans, the Oricorios, and the Marses and red cards, and how they can essentially disrupt you and your game plan, as well as where to put energy, when to swap your Solgaleo in, when to swap it out, and when to essentially play cards from your hand or hold them in your hand. All right, I played this deck in UB4, and so I'm going to show a handful of matchups from some of the climb in Ultra Ball 4. I played close to 200 games across maybe 30 different decks before coming to the conclusion that I truly believe this deck is the absolute best when it comes to climbing the ladder fast and efficiently. So let's go ahead and jump into some of those games. All right, getting into the first game here, the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and actually take a look at the opponent's energy and try to game plan for what type of deck we might be playing against. Now we see electric energy, and so what that makes us think here is that we are going to be playing against a deck with Oricorios, right? Almost all of the decks playing the electric energy are going to essentially have that card in it, and we see a Pachirisu getting dropped down, so most likely going to be a ramp deck, and a lot of times you think this is going to be something like maybe like a Luxray or even the A2B Pikachu deck, Pikachu X deck. So of course we see the Oricorio come down, and we're really glad here that we have the Skarmory, but we only have one Skarmory. So we really want this Pokeball to draw that second Skarmory, because usually you need both to really beat these Oricorio decks. Now unfortunately we don't get it, and having the rare candy and the Solgaleo here, great against just about any other deck that doesn't have an Oricorio in it, as we could essentially be hitting them for 120 super early on, but unfortunately we're not in that position. So we're gonna have to be very, very careful, and we're gonna have to play this Skarmory and this Rocky Helmet very, very well. So hopefully before this Skarmory goes down, we will be able to draw into our second one, and that between the Rocky Helmet and the hitting for 50, that this Skarmory will be able to put in a lot of really good work for us. Now this is where Rocky Helmet and like Poison Dart are really, really important, because they help out so much against these Oricorio decks. Now the Cape is not that great here, because no matter what, the Skarmory survives 2 or 1 shot from the Oricorio. The Cape doesn't really give it any additional benefit, but the Helmet once again allows you to be able to kind of swing back and hit that Oricorio and clear them out. Now, you see we go ahead and we put the Solgaleo down. It's just good to kind of have that on the board in case they, want to leverage something like one of those Pikachus or a Luxray. We kind of have that Solgaleo as insurance to be able to hit it. But right now, it offers us no value. So you can see we go ahead and actually, take out their Pachirisu. This means they essentially are going to be trying to most likely lean on their Oricorio, or maybe try to build something in the mid to late game. But at this point, we're in a pretty good spot. Seeing the second Oricorio, not great. We have one Skarmory here with a Rocky Helmet, 10 HP left, and it essentially has to hold the game together for the all of these 2 Oricorios. And so we have a decision to make here. We could go ahead and sacrifice our Skarmory, but take out that Oricorio along with it, leaving them with an energy dry Oricorio on the board. Or we could buy ourselves a little bit more time and get more value out of this Skarmory by using the Sabrina to bring that Oricorio up. So we go ahead and we do that, drop the energy on the Solgaleo to just make sure that we have that built up in the back. There's not really a better place for that energy to go currently. We're going to go ahead and take a swing at that Oricorio and put the opponent in an interesting spot. Do they burn the energy to bring the other Oricorio back in and take out our Skarmory? Probably the best move for them, but now that they've got that Shinx down, they have a few different options. So not exactly sure what they're thinking or what they want to do here. My guess is that they bring that Oricorio in order to clean up our Skarmory and really leaving us with not a whole lot against them, but instead they bring in the Shinx. Now this is great because this buys us time to be able to try to find that second Skarmory, right? We can go ahead and we can now either bring the Solgaleo up to clear the Shinx, or we can use that Cyrus to basically try to get one of those Oricorios off the board while our Skarmory still can, right? It's only on 10 HP. We essentially don't want to lose that Skarmory without being able to actually take out one of those Oricorios. So we make that decision. We use the Cyrus to basically pull that Oricorio up and try to get as much value out of Skarmory as possible. That's what this matchup is all about. You really have to figure out how to use those Skarmories and your tools to essentially dance around the opponent and basically try to snipe those Oricorios. They are the only thing that are really standing between you winning this matchup. Now, they have the Luxray. Now, the question is, are they able to actually pull a Volkner so that they can pump that Luxray and hit us with it? Now, fortunately, the Solgaleo does survive a hit from the Luxray, so we have that as kind of our insurance that we can be able to pull in here, but it puts us in an awkward situation if our Solgaleo takes a hit from the Oricorio and then has to then try to survive the shot from the Luxray. It gives us no opportunity to be able to hit back without fainting. So once again, we're in a kind of a weird spot here. We really, really need that Skarmory, but at least we have another Solgaleo here that we can build into and use it to essentially dance around and distribute the damage from our opponent in a way that buys us more time, right? Pulling a Skarmory in the next, couple cards, gives us an opportunity to kind of put that cape on it, hit the Oricorio. Professor's Research is great. This gives us a chance to then maybe pull into it. We see a Mars, not great. We see a Pokeball, perfect, exactly what we want. We know this is going to get us the Skarmory, and we can now drop that Skarmory down, swap out the Solgaleo. This is why we put that extra energy on the Solgaleo, so it still leaves it with the ability to come back in and be able to swing immediately. And now we can take out their final Oricorio. And from there, it essentially just becomes Solgaleo against Luxray. Now, the opponent most likely is going to see that this is checkmate. There's not a whole lot they can really do, especially as we build that secondary Solgaleo. And this is essentially a concede. And so from here, the game is over. And you can see how we were able to use Skarmory, only one Skarmory really, with a helmet to get so much value. We then paired it with Sabrina and Cyrus in order to be able to do the dance that we needed to do. Moving into the second matchup here, once again, always like to take a look at the energy that I'm dealing with, and so I can kind of plan. Now we see Dark Energy, going to go ahead and assume that this is some sort of Giratina Darkrai deck, and so unfortunately we don't have a Skarmory here, which is super important for this matchup because it allows you to pressure them while they kind of take a while to build up. Instead, we see a Froakie, which means it's the kind of newer version of the Darktina deck that likes to build up a couple different Pokemon that can essentially chip shot you throughout the whole game. Pretty annoying to deal with, and not having any Skarmories to be able to kind of hit early on is a little bit tough for us. So we're just going to kind of hope that they themselves have a little bit of a slow start, but it does look like they're able to get their Giratina down and also their Darkrai down. So this is not great for us. They kind of have the full package of what they're looking to do. I think the only difference is that they really don't want their Froakie in the lead. I think they really want their Darkrai in the lead here. And so now that we are taking this chip damage, we essentially and have a rare candy in hand while also having our Solgaleo and now pulling the Skarmory as well. Our plan is to just go super fast Solgaleo with the rare candy, and we don't even want to hold and wait. We're okay with showing them the Solgaleo because A, we know these decks like to run red cards and Marses, and we don't want to give them the opportunity to kind of clear out that combo right there, while also putting the Solgaleo down, knowing that I'm going to be hitting for 120 damage next turn, puts pressure on them to have to really think through how are they going to deal with this, right? So it's a great way to actually put that pressure on them and force them to make a mistake because they have to figure out how to actually deal with this, right? Now, putting the dark energy on the Greninja here means they're most likely going to pull it back and bring the Darkrai up. And it looks like that's what they're going to do. And you can also see that while they were trying to figure out how to deal with my Solgaleo, they ran out of time and didn't use the Giratina's ability. Now, this is huge for us. And so, like I said, just getting that Solgaleo down, even though we didn't have the energy to hit with it, put that pressure on them and ultimately force them to make a mistake. Now we're able to then get both our Skarmories down, which might come in handy because we may actually need them to finish the game out, because Solgaleo a lot of times does actually, with damaging itself as well as just not having a super high powered attack, can actually run out of gas a little bit here. And so having the Lily in hand is pretty amazing because we can take all of this chip damage and then really just heal it right back up. And we know their Darkrai isn't quite at enough energy to be able to hit us yet. And the Giratina, they missed an energy on it. So they can't hit us with it next turn even if they wanted to. So here we have a decision to make. And this is a really important one with this deck. And it's when it comes to where do we put this energy. Skarmories don't need it because you can just wait till it's time to pull them in order to drop the energy on them. Now we could think about trying to build up that second Solgaleo. However, the issue is that we don't have it yet. We'd have to draw into it. And so instead we're going to put that third energy on Solgaleo and heal it up, knowing that we may actually have to pull this Solgaleo back at some point and bring a Skarmory in to further chip damage the opponent's Pokemon. And so by doing that, having that third energy on it, it means that when we have to retreat it, it's still in a position where it can go right back in and have an energy applied. However, because they missed that energy on the Giratina, it's just over. So heading into the third matchup here, going second, that's perfect. We love going second with this deck, especially with a Skarmory in hand, and we see fighting energy. So most likely this is going to be a Rampardos deck, but we're not sure what it's going to be paired with yet. So we see Rockruff, and this is actually a really cool deck that you're going to see a lot of on the ladder. And really the best start you can have against this is having that Skarmory. Now we don't have a Pokemon tool, so we're going to want to make sure that that Professor's Research can draw us into one. Now that's why we put 4 tools in this deck, so that we can ensure that we are going to have a very high likelihood that Skarmory is going to be able to hit for that 50. So there's a very good chance that our Professor's Research is going to draw us into one of the tools that we need. And so we're going to go ahead and see what we get. We have a rare candy. Fine, not great because we don't have that Cosmog yet. We don't draw into the Cosmog, so we don't really have much to follow up this Skarmory. So it's really our only attacking Pokemon. It's really the only thing we have here. So we're going to go ahead and chip that Rockruff and force the opponent to have to make a really interesting decision here of whether they want to use the Rockruff's ability and sacrifice it, or if they want to maybe try and put something else up front and do that kind of little bit of a dance and buy themselves some more time. Fortunately, it's a pretty linear deck for the most part, so they're going to kind of have to put the energy on the Rockruff and go ahead and sacrifice it in order to try to thin the deck and get the Lyconroc and their Rampardos built. Looks like they have the rare candy and the Rampardos, so this is really, really scary. If we really need to draw into either another Skarmory or into a Cosmog so that we can actually start building that Solgaleo, or else they are just going to completely run us over. And that's what's crazy about these rare candy Rampardos decks, is that they can run you over so quickly, no matter how advantageous of a position you are in. We draw the Cosmog, and this is beautiful. Best card we could draw at this point in time. And we are going to go ahead and clear the Rockruff, get our first point, and then we're going to start building that Cosmog into the Solgaleo so that next turn it is ready to go. Now, unfortunately, looking at a Rampardos and at a Lycanroc they're going to go ahead and put down, it puts us in an awkward position, particularly as if our Skarmory hits into that Lycanroc. It now allows that Lycanroc to do 100 damage on their next turn and completely wipe that Skarmory out. That essentially just leaves us with our Cosmog versus the Rampardos, and the Solgaleo against the Rampardos, and the Solgaleo it being in a position where it's going to now take 2 hits from that Rampardos. So we see a Sabrina, and honestly, that is the best card we could have drawn. Now, this is why Sabrina is so powerful. We can go ahead and we can actually take that Sabrina and force them to have to make a decision of whether they want to bring in their Rampardos or they want to bring in the Skull Fossil. If they bring in the Skull Fossil, it's a free point for us, and now they are on game point and on their back foot. If they bring in the Rampardos, we can now hit it with our Skarmory and then basically ensure that we can one-shot it with our Solgaleo on that next turn and then easily wipe out the Lycanroc after that. So this Sabrina was literally the checkmate card that we are able to utilize in the pretty early to mid game. Now the opponent knows it's over. There's nothing that they can do. That Sabrina has now put them in a position where they have no win cons, and the game is over just like that. All right, heading into our fourth and final matchup here, we're going first, and we see Fighting Energy. So we're going to go ahead and assume this is one of the Rampardos decks. Seeing the Gibble here, we know it's going to be the Rampardos Garchomp deck. A very, very powerful deck that can get going very quickly. Now, we have the Skarmory in hand, and we have a Professor's Research. So our goal here is essentially to chip away as much as we can with the Skarmory while we build up the Solgaleo in the back. Now, unfortunately, we don't have our Cosmog to be able to start doing that, and so we're going to really hope that by the time that we have a spare energy for it, we can actually we will be able to draw that Cosmog into our hand. Now, using the Poison Barb here is better than the Rocky Helmet because it forces them to have to think about whether they want to rare candy evolve that lead Gibble. If they do so, and then they try to hit us or attack into us, they then end up having their fully evolved Pokemon be poisoned with not really much way to deal with it without swapping them out of their active spot. So that's a really, really great way to kind of scare them from, putting energy on or evolving their lead Pokemon. Now, we've got 2 Pokeballs that we draw into here, which is perfect. We know we can basically hit our Cosmog, so we get our backup Skarmory. This next one's definitely going to get us our Cosmog, and at this point, we've got 2 rare candies in our Cosmoem, and so we're really just trying to get that Solgaleo drawn out so we can start building it while we let the Skarmory kind of do its job with its chip damage. So having the double Skarmory, having the Poison Dart, having the Rocky Helmet is great. We can basically just keep throwing those up, chipping away, poisoning the opponent, weakening them while we build our Solgaleo in the back to essentially just sweep them out. Now here, there basically looks like that they're going to sacrifice their lead Gibble and try to build up their Gibble in the back, try to most likely get to having a Rampardos and having that Garchomp in the back that they can essentially use to try to clean us out. Now, we're pretty easy decision here. We're going to go ahead and take out the Gibble, but we're in an interesting position where if they're able to get their Garchomp fully evolved with a rare candy next turn, what they can do is they can either start hitting our bench and basically try to take out our Cosmoem before we can actually evolve it into a Solgaleo, or they could decide to just straight up clear out our Skarmories one by one. So it's an interesting decision. I think that they know that the scariest thing that they have to deal with is that Solgaleo, and so they decide to use the linear attack to basically try to take that out. Now, we really need to draw into a Solgaleo here. High likelihood we do, and we find it. So this is great for us because we can immediately now evolve into this. We have the Lily that we can use in order to bring that thing back up to essentially full health, and then be the first to hit into the Garchomp, which is super important here, right? We want to be the first one hitting into the Garchomp so that we know that we can take it out in 2 shots, while they only get 1 shot against us. Now, if they are able to get their Rampardos built in the back, that's going to be problematic for us because that could just go through and sweep our entire team, sweep our Skarmories, right? Potentially be able to hit through the Rocky Helmet, be able to hit through the Poison Barb, and be able to hang on. And so from here, our goal is essentially to clear out their Garchomp and hope that they can't get to that Rampardos. Now, if they are able to get to the Rampardos, that's going to be problematic. And so our goal is to try, right at this point, is to get it drawn to our Sabrina. If we can draw into our Sabrina, taking out that fossil before it gets going is actually way more scary than a Garchomp with 30 health. And so we see the Sabrina. This is perfect. We now have the ability to snipe the skull fossil and before they can even build it into a Rampardos, and essentially they're left with no follow-up, right? Like any of our Skarmories can just come in now and actually clean out that Garchomp or Sabrina in the skull fossil and clear that out as well. So we move the Solgaleo back just to ensure that it can't be wiped out by the Rampardos on the next turn. We want to have that as like our sweeper, right? Our Solgaleo is really there to sweep. Even with 70 health, we want to be attacking with that 120 as our last shot, not as leaving it up front to basically be bait for our opponent to get an easy 2 points. And so you can see Sabrina up the fossil. Nothing they can really do here. No matter what, we can just wipe them out with our Skarmory, and that's essentially going to be the game. And so you can see here the Rampardos decks, which tend to be very consistent, and when they have something like Garchomp, they just have so much firepower and flexibility, still can't handle our game plan when it comes together. All right, trainers, and to summarize, I just want to say that right now, I think based on where we are in the meta in this first week, I truly believe that this deck is going to be the best deck you can use to climb the ladder efficiently. It may not be the absolute best deck in the meta, but it's fast, it's consistent, it's just a pretty solid deck all around, and it has pretty neutral matchups without too many really hardcore counters. So if you can actually learn to master this deck and use some of the techniques and tips that I showed and kind of how to play it against some of these key matchups, how to always be aware of some of the core tech that's being used against you, I really think this is going to be a really fun deck to use and a deck that will be successful for you in climbing. Now, if you're generally struggling with climbing the ladder and you want to see my video on some of the expert tips and tricks that I used last month in order to get to Master Ball rank within the first 3 days of the season and a 72% win rate, feel free to check that out. Otherwise, go ahead and leave a like below or subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and we'll see you in the next one.